They took $50K without asking. So that night, I made sure the house was no longer theirs. My name is Morgan Hudson, and at 26 I thought I had finally found my footing in life. I had a steady job as a software engineer, a modest apartment, and most importantly, $50,000 in savings that I'd been meticulously building for 3 years. Every dollar was earmarked for one purpose: the down payment on my first home. But on a cold Tuesday morning in November, I woke up to find my account empty. Not a single cent remained. The money that represented years of sacrifice, countless overtime hours, and skipped meals was gone. When I confronted my parents about it, my mother's response still echoes in my mind. "You live under our roof. Your money is our money." What they didn't know was that I had been secretly paying the property taxes on their house for the past 2 years. And what they definitely didn't know was that in the state of California, there's a little-known law about tax lien certificates that would give me something far more valuable than my $50,000 back. Before I tell you exactly how I turn the tables on them, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and hit that like button if you've ever had family take advantage of your hard work. Trust me, what happens next will show you that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. The foundation cracks. Growing up in the Hudson household meant walking on financial eggshells. My parents, David and Linda Hudson, immigrated from Taiwan in the early 90s with big dreams and limited resources. Dad worked as a mechanic while Mom cleaned offices at night. They sacrificed everything to buy a modest 3-bedroom house in San Jose, California, in 1998, right before the housing market exploded. For years, they preached the value of hard work and saving money. "Education is the only way out," Dad would say, pointing to his grease-stained hands. "You study hard, get good job, make us proud." Mom would nod in agreement while counting bills at the Kit Hudson table, always worried about making ends meet. But something changed when I started making good money. The parents who had taught me to save every penny suddenly developed expensive tastes. Dad bought a used BMW, claiming his old Honda was embarrassing. Mom started shopping at Nordstrom instead of Target, saying she deserved nice things after years of sacrifice. I graduated from UC Berkeley with a computer science degree and landed a job at a tech startup. My starting salary was $85,000 more money than our family had ever seen. Instead of celebrating, my parents immediately began treating me like their personal ATM. "Morgan, can you help with the mortgage this month?" became a weekly request. "Just $800. We'll pay you back." But payback never came. Instead, there were always new emergencies: car repairs, medical bills, home improvements that somehow never got completed. By the time I was 25, I had given them nearly $20,000 in loans that were never repaid. But I kept detailed records of everything: dates, amounts, reasons given. My background in data analysis made me naturally meticulous about tracking financial information. That's when I made a decision that would later save me. I opened a separate savings account at a different bank, one my parents knew nothing about. Every month, I transferred money there religiously, $2,000 from each paycheck, sometimes more when I worked overtime. I lived like a college student: ramen noodles, generic groceries, secondhand clothes, while my savings grew. The discovery. The morning of November 15th started like any other. I was reviewing my finances over coffee when I logged into my main checking account. The balance showed $247. My heart stopped. Just the day before, it had shown $50,247. I immediately called the bank, hands shaking as I dialed. After 20 minutes of security questions and transfers between departments, the fraud specialist delivered the devastating news. "Mr. Hudson, I'm looking at your account history. There was a wire transfer yesterday at 2:47 p.m. for $50,000 to a Wells Fargo account under the names David and Linda Hudson. The transaction was authorized using your online banking credentials. That's my parents' account, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But I didn't authorize this. I understand your concern, sir. However, our records show this is the 7th transfer you've made to this account over the past 2 years. The system flagged it as a regular transaction pattern. The room spun around me. Those previous transfers, the loans I'd given them, had created a pattern that made this massive theft look routine to the bank's fraud detection system. I hung up and immediately drove to my parents' house. Their driveway, which had been empty when I visited 2 weeks ago, now held a brand new Tesla Model S. In the garage, I could see boxes from Best Buy and Williams-Sonoma stacked like Christmas presents. When I walked in without knocking, a privilege I'd had since childhood, Mom was arranging flowers in a crystal vase I'd never seen before. Dad sat in a new leather recliner, watching a massive flat-screen TV. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. Mom looked up with feigned innocence. "Morgan, perfect timing. Look at this beautiful vase your father bought me. And wait until you see the new Kit Hudson appliances we ordered." I pulled out my phone, showing her the banking app with the $247 balance. My money, all of it, gone. Dad muted the TV and turned to face me. "Now, son, before you get upset, let us explain. You have 30 seconds. "We needed to make some purchases," Mom said as if discussing the weather. "The house needed updates, and your father's car was giving him trouble. You live under our roof. Your money is our money. That's how families work." The casual way she dismissed my life savings, 3 years of sacrifice, hit me like a physical blow. That was my down payment for a house, everything I've worked for. Dad stood up from his new chair. "You're 26 years old, living in our house, eating our food. You think you're too good for family obligations? In Chinese culture, children support their parents. It's respect." "Respect?" I could barely contain my rage. "You stole from me. You used my banking information without permission. We raised you," Mom snapped. "Fed you, clothed you, put you through college. A little payback is the least you can do. I've already given you $20,000 in loans you never repaid. And now you've given us $50,000 more," Dad said with a shrug. "Consider it rent for all the years you've lived here." I looked around the living room at the new furniture, the massive TV, the expensive decorations. They had spent my future on luxury items, then had the audacity to lecture me about family obligations. "I need my money back. All of it." Mom laughed. "It's spent, Morgan. Besides, you'll inherit this house someday. Think of it as an advance on your inheritance." That's when something clicked in my mind. The house, the inheritance, the property taxes. For the past 2 years, I had been anonymously paying their property tax bills. They had fallen behind during Dad's unemployment period, and rather than let them lose the house, I had quietly taken care of it. The payments totaled nearly $8,000, and I had made them through the county tax office online portal. What my parents didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that in California, when property taxes go unpaid, the county can sell tax lien certificates to recover the debt. And the person who pays those taxes gains certain legal rights to the property. I had paid their taxes for 2 consecutive years. Under California Revenue and Taxation Code Section 3691, I could petition the county for a tax deed if I could prove I had a legitimate claim as a taxpayer who had made payments on their behalf. "Fine," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Keep the money. But I'm moving out today." "Don't be dramatic," Mom said. "You'll get over it." I walked out without another word, my mind already formulating a plan. The investigation. Back at my apartment, I spent the next 3 days researching California tax law and gathering documentation. My software engineering background had taught me to approach problems systematically, and this was no different. First, I confirmed the tax payment history. I had indeed paid $4,200 in 2021 and $3,800 in 2022 directly to the Santa Clara County Tax Collector's Office. I had receipts, bank statements, and email confirmations for every payment. Next, I researched the legal precedents. California law is complex, but there were cases where third parties who paid property taxes had successfully claimed ownership interests in properties. The key was proving that the payments were made with the property owner's knowledge and that the payer had a reasonable expectation of reimbursement. I also discovered something interesting about my parents' mortgage. During my years of helping them financially, I had occasionally reviewed their mail when they asked me to help with bills. Their mortgage was an adjustable rate loan that had recently reset to a much higher interest rate. Based on the payment schedule I remembered, they were probably struggling to make the monthly payments even with my stolen money. But I needed more information. I needed to know exactly what their financial situation looked like. That's when I remembered that Mom had asked me to help her set up online banking 2 years ago. She had used the same password for everything, Hudson 1998, the year they bought the house. I wondered if she had ever changed it. From my laptop, I accessed their bank account. The password still worked. What I found confirmed my suspicions. The $50,000 was already nearly gone. They had paid off credit card debt, made the Tesla down payment, bought the furniture and appliances, and even purchased airline tickets for a cruise. But most telling were the upcoming scheduled payments. Their mortgage payment had increased to $3,800 per month, and they had less than $12,000 remaining in their account. Without my monthly loans, they would be underwater within 3 months. I documented everything, taking screenshots and printing records. Then I began phase 2 of my plan, the legal maneuver. I contacted James Morrison, a real estate attorney who specialized in property disputes. His consultation fee was $300, money I could barely afford after losing my savings. But it was an investment in justice. "This is an unusual situation," Morrison said after reviewing my documentation. "Tax lien certificates in California don't automatically transfer ownership, but they do create a legal claim that can be enforced under certain circumstances." He explained that while I couldn't simply take the house, I could file a petition claiming a beneficial interest in the property based on my tax payments. If successful, it would create a lien against the house that would need to be satisfied before my parents could sell or refinance. "The strongest argument is that you made these payments with the understanding that you had an interest in preserving the property for your eventual inheritance," Morrison explained. "Your parents' recent actions taking your money without permission could be seen as breaching that understanding. The legal fees would be substantial, nearly $5,000 to file the petition and see it through." But Morrison offered to work on contingency, taking payment only if we were successful. "There's another angle we can pursue," he said. "If your parents used your banking information without permission to make that transfer, that's wire fraud. It doesn't matter that they're your parents. The FBI takes wire fraud very seriously, especially when it involves amounts over $50,000. I hadn't considered criminal charges, but Morrison was right. What they had done wasn't just morally wrong, it was legally fraud. The confrontation. Before pursuing legal action, I decided to give my parents one final chance to make things right. I texted both of them. "Family meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. We need to discuss the money situation." Dad responded, "Fine, but we're not changing our minds." Mom added, "Bring dinner? We'll be busy setting up the new Kit Hudson." The audacity was breathtaking. I arrived at their house the next evening with a folder of documents, but no dinner. They were in the Kit Hudson, admiring their new stainless steel appliances. "Where's the food?" Mom asked without looking up from her new wine fridge. "We need to talk first." I sat down at their Kit Hudson table and opened my folder. "I want my money back, all of it." Dad sighed dramatically. Morgan, we've been through this. The money is spent. Move on. Then I have some information you might find interesting. I laid out the property tax receipts on the table. For the past 2 years I've been paying your property taxes. $8,000 total. Their expressions shifted from annoyance to confusion. In California, I continued, when someone pays property taxes on another person's property, they gain what's called a beneficial interest in that property. I've filed a petition with the county claiming that interest. What does that mean? Mom asked, her voice suddenly smaller. It means I have a legal claim to this house. Not ownership, but a lien. If you want to sell or refinance, you'll have to settle with me first. Dad's face turned red. You can't do that. This is our house. You're right, it is your house, but you owe me $58,000, the $50,000 you stole, plus the $8,000 in tax payments I made on your behalf. That's ridiculous, Mom said. You can't charge us for money you chose to pay. Actually, I can, especially when the people who benefited from those payments later stole from me. I pulled out another document. This is a complaint I've prepared for the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. Wire fraud is a federal crime. When you used my banking credentials without permission to transfer $50,000, you committed a felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison. The room fell silent except for the humming of their new refrigerator. You wouldn't, Dad whispered. Try me. Mom started crying. Morgan, we're your parents. You can't send us to prison over money. You didn't seem to care about being my parents when you were stealing my life savings. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at their new Tesla. Here's what's going to happen. You have 48 hours to return my money. All of it. If you don't, I'm filing both the civil petition and the criminal complaint. We don't have it, Dad exploded. It's spent. Then figure it out. Sell the car, return the appliances, take out a loan. I don't care how you do it, but you'll find a way. And if we can't? Mom asked through her tears. I turned back to face them. Then you'll lose the house anyway. My lien will force a sale, and I'll collect my money from the proceeds. The only difference is whether you go to prison first. I left them sitting in their pristine new Kit Hudson, surrounded by the evidence of their theft. The deadline. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in watching karma work its magic. My parents called me 6 times, each conversation more desperate than the last. First, they tried guilt. Morgan, we raised you better than this. Family doesn't threaten family. Then anger. You ungrateful brat, after everything we've done for you. Then bargaining. We can pay you back slowly, $1,000 a month. Finally, panic. Please, Morgan, we made a mistake. Can't we work something out? I didn't budge. $58,000, 48 hours. That was the deal. On the morning of the deadline, Dad called with defeat in his voice. We can get you $35,000. We return the appliances and put the Tesla up for sale. A dealer will buy it tomorrow. That's not enough. It's all we can manage without losing the house. You should have thought of that before you stole from me. There was a long pause. What will it take to make this go away? I had been thinking about this moment for 2 days. $58,000, plus a written apology acknowledging what you did was theft, and you sign over the deed to the house. The deed? Morgan, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You wanted to treat me like a tenant paying rent? Fine. But landlords don't get to steal from their tenants. That house is our life's work. And that $50,000 was mine. Another pause. What if we gave you the $35,000 now and signed a payment plan for the rest? With what guarantee? You've already stolen from me once. We'll put it in writing. Legal documents. I pretended to consider it. $50,000 total, $35,000 immediately, $15,000 within 6 months. Miss a single payment, and the house becomes mine. And you both sign a confession letter admitting to wire fraud. A confession. Insurance. If you try to screw me again, I'll have written proof of the crime. Dad was quiet for nearly a minute. We need to think about it. You have until 5 p.m. After that, I file the criminal complaint. The resolution. At 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before my deadline, my parents called. We accept your terms, Dad said, his voice hollow. All of them? Yes, all of them. 2 days later, we met at Morrison's office. My parents looked like they had aged years in the span of a week. Mom's hair was disheveled and Dad's hands shook as he signed the documents. The payment plan was ironclad. $35,000 immediately deposited into my account before we left the office. $15,000 in monthly installments of $2,500 over 6 months. If they missed a single payment, the house would transfer to me automatically. They also signed a detailed confession letter, acknowledging that they had accessed my bank account without permission and transferred $50,000 without my consent. The letter was notarized and witnessed. But the most satisfying moment came when Morrison explained the final clause I had insisted on. Mr. and Mrs. Hudson, he said, you need to understand that this agreement includes a provision for your son's living expenses, since you claimed he was paying rent by contributing to household expenses, and since this house now serves as collateral for your debt to him, Morgan has the right to occupy the property rent-free until the debt is satisfied. My parents stared at him in shock. What does that mean? Mom asked. It means I'm moving back in, I said, and I won't be paying for groceries or utilities. Consider it interest on the money you stole. Dad's face turned purple. This is our house. Actually, Morrison said, consulting the documents, this house is collateral for a debt. Mr. Morgan Hudson now has significant legal rights as a secured creditor. I smiled at my parents. Don't worry. I'll be a much better tenant than you were landlords. The aftermath. Moving back into my childhood home under these circumstances was surreal. My parents barely spoke to me, communicating only when necessary, but I noticed they were very careful to make their monthly payments on time. The first payment of $2,500 arrived in my account exactly 30 days after we signed the agreement. The second payment came 30 days later. They were clearly taking the consequences seriously. The dynamic in the house had shifted completely. Where once my parents had treated me like a child they could financially exploit, now they walked on eggshells around me. I had the master bedroom. I claimed it the day I moved back in, and they didn't dare complain. Mom continued to cook dinner, but now she asked if I wanted any instead of expecting me to be grateful. Dad stopped leaving his dishes in the sink, knowing I was no longer obligated to clean up after him. The Tesla was gone, replaced by Dad's old Honda. The living room looked bare without the expensive furniture they'd returned, but they had kept the new TV a small consolation prize for their failed scheme. 3 months into the payment plan, Dad approached me with a proposal. Morgan, we've been thinking, what if we sold the house and split the proceeds? You'd get your money back, and we could start fresh somewhere smaller. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been working on a freelance project. Why would I want that? Well, you'd have your money back, plus your share of the house value. Dad, I'm going to get my money back anyway, and if you default on the payments, I get the entire house. Why would I settle for half? He had no answer to that. The fourth payment came late day 32 instead of day 30. I immediately called Morrison. Technically, they're in default, he said, but 2 days late probably isn't enough to justify seizing the house. However, we can send them a formal notice that any future late payments will trigger the full penalty. The notice worked. The fifth payment arrived a week early, and the sixth and final payment came with a $200 bonus for your patience. The final reckoning. When the last payment cleared my account, I had recovered my full $50,000 plus the $8,000 in property taxes, plus an additional $3,000 in interest and fees we had built into the agreement. $58,000, exactly what I had demanded. But more importantly, I had something else: power. I called a family meeting the day after the final payment. "Congratulations," I said as we sat around their Kit Hudson table. "You've successfully repaid your debt." Mom and Dad exchanged glances, clearly wondering where this was going. "However," I continued, "there's still the matter of the confession letter you signed. Wire fraud is a federal crime with no statute of limitations." Dad's face went white. "But we paid you back." "You paid back the money you stole. That doesn't erase the crime." "Morgan," Mom pleaded, "you have your money. What more do you want?" I leaned back in my chair, studying their faces. "I want to know that you understand what you did. Not just that you stole money, but that you betrayed your own son's trust for luxury items. I want to know that you've learned something from this." They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Dad spoke. "We made a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" We took your money without asking. You stole from me, say it." Another pause. "We stole from you. And?" Mom wiped tears from her eyes. "And we were wrong. We're sorry, Morgan, we were wrong." I studied their faces looking for sincerity. What I saw was defeat, shame, and genuine remorse. "I'm not filing criminal charges," I said finally, "but I'm keeping the confession letter. If you ever try to manipulate me financially again, if you ever even ask me for money, I'll file it immediately." They nodded quickly. "And from now on, our financial relationship is completely separate. You don't get to know how much I make, how much I save, or what I spend money on. In return, I won't interfere in your finances either." "Agreed," Dad said. "One more thing. I'm moving out next week. I've saved enough for a down payment on my own place." Mom looked surprised. "But you could stay here. The house is so big." I shook my head. "I need my own space, a place where I don't have to worry about people stealing from me." As I packed my belongings that weekend, I reflected on everything that had happened. My parents had stolen my money, but in doing so, they had taught me valuable lessons about boundaries, leverage, and standing up for myself. The house I eventually bought was smaller than what I had originally planned, but it was mine. Every payment I made was building my own equity, not subsidizing someone else's luxury purchases. The epilogue. 2 years later, my relationship with my parents had evolved into something new. We spoke regularly, but money was never discussed. They had learned to live within their means, and I had learned to protect my financial boundaries. When Dad's car finally died, he called to tell me he was taking the bus to work rather than ask for help buying a new one. When Mom mentioned wanting to redecorate the living room, she talked about saving up for it rather than hinting that I should contribute. They had learned that their son's success was not their personal ATM. I had learned that family love didn't mean accepting financial abuse. The confession letter remained in my safe deposit box, never filed but never forgotten. It served as a reminder that actions have consequences, even within families. My business had grown substantially. The freelance work I had started while living in their house had evolved into a full-time consulting practice. I specialized in helping small businesses protect themselves from financial fraud experience that proved surprisingly relevant. One day, Mom called with news that surprised me. "Morgan, your father and I have been talking. We want to pay you back for all those years of loans we never repaid. The $20,000 from before all this happened." "Mom, that's not necessary." "Yes, it is. We kept track too. Every dollar you gave us we wrote down. We want to make it right." "What changed?" There was a pause. "We realized that you could have destroyed us. You had the power to take our house, send us to prison, ruin our lives. But you didn't. You taught us a lesson instead." 6 months later, they had repaid every cent of those old loans, plus interest. But the most meaningful moment came during Chinese New Year dinner at their house. As we sat around the table, Dad raised his glass. "To Morgan," he said, For teaching us that respect goes both ways. Mom nodded. And for showing us that family means protecting each other, not taking advantage. I raised my glass in return. To family, the kind that's built on mutual respect instead of financial exploitation. We had found our way back to each other, but on completely different terms. Terms that honored both family loyalty and individual dignity. As I drove home that night to my own house bought with money I had saved and protected, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be a victim and teaching people to treat you with the respect you deserve. The $50,000 they had stolen was long since recovered, but the lesson we had all learned about boundaries, consequences, and genuine family love was worth far more than money. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do when someone betrays you isn't to destroy them. It's to show them exactly what they stand to lose if they continue down that path, and then give them the chance to choose differently. In the end, they chose differently, and that made all the difference. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have taken the house, or would you have given your parents a chance to make things right? Have you ever had to set serious boundaries with family members who took advantage of your success? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself and the power of consequences. Remember, you teach people how to treat you. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is show them what happens when they treat you badly.